Live? Are we not live? We are live. Good morning. Good morning. So thank you very much for tuning in. As I said in my brief intro this morning for the This Is Burnout campaign week, I am joined by my very, very first guest this morning, Michelle Yeoman. Hey, how are you?
Hello.
Very excited to have you here.
Oh, it's an exciting start to the week.
It's like 10 o'clock on a Monday morning, right? And we're here to talk about burnout. And I know, you and I have both had, and we've had some conversations, haven't we? And I think sometimes it almost feels like you and I are kind of like the same person living these kind of parallel experiences, right? Different parts of the country, doing it in a slightly different way. But I think through our own previous conversations, it is literally like we have the same experiences all of the time, right?
Yeah, it's bizarre, and our birthday's in the same month. We're the same age. Like, it's just really the same star sign. Like, there's too many similarities to mention, I think.
There are. But we're going to be, because I think in terms of our burnout experiences, again, I think we've had some similarities, but I also know that we've had some really big differences. And I'm really, really interested for you to be able to share that today. But before we get into the kind of big topic of burnout and how crap it is and all of that sort of stuff, give us something really lovely, right? Tell us about you, a little bit about you and what it is that you do.
Okay, so thank you for the warm welcome to start with, I guess. So I am an accredited executive coach and former HR director, and I'm now the CEO and founder of Awakened Executives. And my mission, along with a team of associates I work with, is to help organisations and leaders to be happy, healthy and high performing. And I guess that was born out of my own burnout experience and all my many years in corporate. But this kind of link between being fulfilled and having an impact, and having a home life that's not kind of transactional. It's not, where you feel like you're juggling stuff all the time, but being able to create a life and career that you love without burning out. And that doesn't mean you won't have crap days here and there, and that every day you wake up and everything's rosy. But for me, it's enabling leaders and their families and people within their communities to benefit from being happy, healthy and high performing. I think everyone can be, as long as they know what they need to know.
I love that. Happy, healthy and high performing. And I suppose on that, because I think you and I, again, we do similar work, but in very completely different ways, really. But again, I think if I had come to you whilst you were in the corporate world and been like, Michelle, right, you can work less, you can set these boundaries, you can be like happy, healthy and high performing, right? If I'd been pitching that to you like 10 years ago, what do you think you'd have said to me?
I probably would have been in two different camps. One would have been like, I don't need it. I've got it all in hand. Like, I'm doing this thing and I'm okay. And then on the other hand, if I was really honest with myself, I'd be like, oh my God, you're my savior. Like you are the person that I need. Because actually this is pretty hard work and I feel guilty when I'm at work, guilty when I'm not, not feeling present with my kids. And just on, I was kind of like the hamster wheel. You kind of feeling like you're just on this wheel the whole time, trying not to fall off. So I think, probably would have been two different feelings. But ultimately, I know that you would have been the saviour that I needed.
And again, I think for both of us within the work that we do, right, and I think probably because we have been through burnout, we know that it does not have to be this way. We know that things can change. We know that we can create different things. But we did go through a lot of the crap in order to make that happen. And I suppose I'm, with what you said there, if I come to you, you'd be like, well, I don't need it, right? I'm fine. And again, I think for both of us, like we experience that on a daily basis, right? With a lot of the people that we're speaking to, because so many people assume that they are fine, right? The high pressure, high stress, the guilt, the overworking, the long out, right? Well, surely that's just part of the corporate world, right? We all have to be living that way. We all have to be experiencing that, right? We get paid the money in order for us to be doing that stuff, right? We're being paid like big money to put up with crap, to feel stressed, to feel guilty and do all of that sort of stuff. So actually, like, what's the issue, right? So surely we signed up for this and we did what we needed to do. But having both been through it, we do know that there is a different way. And yeah, and so I suppose I'm quite pleased that you kind of started with that, right? Well, there's nothing wrong with me, and then, right then, there doesn't have to be. And I suppose throughout the course of this week, there doesn't have to be anything wrong with any of us to recognise that this happy, healthy, high performing, as you phrased it there, like, can be achieved.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's a real hard one. I mean, you and I both work with leaders in the corporate world still now, and some of them are on the brink of burnout. Some of them, for me, have experienced burnout, and they're working with me to kind of come back to the working world and come back to themselves.
Yeah.
You've got other people that you can look at and know that the habits and behaviours that they have in place and the environment that they work in is not particularly helpful. And actually, if they continue on that road, they will end up in that situation. So for me, they're almost like life skills. You know, it's not like get to the point of being on the brink or having burnt out to suddenly have this epiphany. You know, how can we make sure that people, whatever generation they're coming from, are putting in the right boundaries, you know, knowing themselves well enough, you know, working in environments, working with organizations directly to make sure that they're creating these psychologically safe environments for people to do and be their best.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Yeah, and I know we're on the same page with this stuff. So I'm very so let's kind of get into you then and your experience of it. Again, raising awareness, doing everything that we can. And if anybody is watching us live and you've got questions from Michelle, please do pop them in the comments, and we'll try and answer these as we go through. But Michelle, from your experience, just talk to, like, when did you experience burnout? Like what like when was it happening for you?
So my actual burnout experience was in 2019, and it was actually when I was a business owner. So I transitioned out of the corporate world and set up my own company. But twice before that, I'd been on the brink of burnout. So I'd worked in the pharmaceutical industry, sort of high expectation, you know, quite fierce kind of environment. And both times, coming from an HR background, it had been when the organisations were going through significant organisational change. And my role in both of those situations was also at risk. So you've got kind of the double whammy of, you know, we have to look after everybody else, you know, do everything that needs to be done to take care of everybody else, but in the background knowing that your role was at risk at the same time and you were likely going to leave the organisation at a later date. Both of those times I had a young family. You know, I was trying to do everything and be everything to all people. And in both of those scenarios, I managed to catch myself through things that came along in my life, or, you know, experiences that happened, that I managed to kind of come out of that cliff edge, you know, and kind of bring myself back to just about coping. And I ironically left the corporate world to escape it, because I knew that probably at some point it was going to catch me out.
Yeah.
So when it did actually get me, I was probably 6 to 9 months into my kind of self-employment journey. There were other stuff going at home. We'd moved house. We were undergoing a major building project. So the house was in turmoil. So when we talk about the working environment, obviously in the corporate environment, the environment can be one particular setting. You know, you and I know how toxic or, you know, hard work it can be, and all the other kind of constraints that come from the corporate environment. But actually, if I'm talking here to business owners, you can also have an environment where, you know, you could be working from home, but your work environment is not conducive to good working. So I guess I was in that situation where I'm an introvert. I had people in the house all the time. The house was in chaos, and I just wasn't getting any kind of downtime at all. But within that kind of business owner environment, I'd gone from being in a relatively secure, stable environment where I kind of knew what I was doing. And then you move to being a business owner where you know what you're doing, as in, you know, your expertise and you know what you're kind of bringing to the table and all those kind of years of credibility almost. But all of a sudden you have to put yourself out there. You have to find business. I was out there on social media, which I've never really done before. And I was trying to do things probably at a speed that my business wasn't ready for. So I was, you know, I was doing a number of things and juggling. I was on that hamster wheel, but in a slightly different way. And I ran a retreat with my business, and this retreat went really, really well. But the sustained effort that had gone in beforehand was quite high. And literally I managed to get to the end of it, and my body just said enough is enough. So I literally had like a mental and physical reaction literally upon closing the door from these lovely retreat participants, and it kind of went down here from there, really. So it's quite a unique story in that it's not the classic kind of, you know, being in the corporate environment and then getting caught out. Mine was almost like third time unlucky.
Yeah, and again, I know when we've spoken about it before, so I got really bad burnout in corporate. Thought I was over that, but of course wanted to understand why it happened to me, how I could stop it happening to anybody else. Like when I understood how many other people within that organization had gone through it, I went into like fix it mode, right? We've got to stop this thing. And then I was a bit later, I was probably 18 months into my like setting up my own business journey, that it hit me for the second time. But again, similarly to you, like I'd moved house, my marriage had broken down, you know, all of this stuff had kind of happened, and I couldn't understand it like the second time round, because it was like I'd done all of this work on, right, it's all corporate, it's all this stuff, and then when it happened the second time, it's like, right, what, like this is crap, right? This is like, and I felt even more of a hypocrite, really, because it was like, I've done all this training, I've done all this learning, I should understand all of this stuff, and now it's happened to me again. But what I hadn't done, I hadn't given myself the break. One of the clients that I was working with was still in that toxic environment, and even some of them had been the same people that had been involved with my first burnout in corporate, which I hadn't necessarily twigged on. And I still wasn't setting boundaries. I still wasn't taking time for myself. I still hadn't really done the really deep work, right, on who am I, and all that kind of stuff. I just thought, well, I've left corporate now. It's not going to happen. Whilst you were kind of going through that, so you said third time unlucky, and you know, lots of people will talk about it as a stress situation. But I don't know about you, I didn't feel, even with all the crap that was going on, and again, maybe I just got used to this is the way that corporate life is, I didn't feel stressed. If I had, again, if with hindsight, if I'd have spoken to you at that point and said, Michelle, like, where are your stress levels at? I suppose as you nearly got to that point in corporate and then coming out of it within your own business, would you have said you were stressed?
Oh, I think I was, but it was a different type of stress. You know, there was nobody, there was no hierarchy. You know, there was no boss. I was, by that point, was my own boss.
Yeah.
You know, there was no one telling me when I had to start work, when I had to finish work, what I needed to do. They were all my own decisions. So the stress was there because we had a, you know, building project going on, and you know, but the stress was inbuilt, as in the pressure was coming from me. Yeah. And it was my own values and belief system that was out of kilter, as opposed to the environment where, you know, I had expectations, deadlines, all of the other, you know, in the other two situations, it was completely different. But yeah, I'd say I was probably, if I look back, I was stressed, but I probably didn't recognize it as that because I was so passionate and motivated about what I was doing. I felt like that was almost like the key not to burn out, but actually it's not.
Yeah. And why do you think you were putting that pressure on yourself? So we started the conversation, didn't we, talk about boundaries? Do you think you had the right boundaries, but also why were you putting that pressure on yourself?
I didn't have the right boundaries because I think when you start out in business, and you know, I think this is very common of business owners, you are very passionate about what you do 9 times out of 10 because you've set your business up on the basis of some things that you fundamentally believe in, but you are thinking about it all the time. So, you know, you end up thinking about it in the middle of the night. You end up kind of waking up in the morning, thinking, oh, I can start work now. So you kind of put these boundaries in place. You know, and I was exercising, I was getting out, you know, I was doing all the right things because I then had a much more flexible schedule than I would have had previously. But I remember my outplacement coach telling me when I left corporate, saying to me, don't give up your childcare. You will still need your childcare. But obviously one of the reasons I was leaving was so that I could be the best mum and I could go and pick my kids up from school rather than picking them up from the childminder. So I cut all of that out. So my days were compressed. I was then down to like a 5-hour day because a school day is obviously very, very short. And that was what I thought the dream was. You know, I thought that's what I wanted my life to be. And the reality was just very different. I was just trying to do too much too soon, in too short a period of time, and trying to do it all myself. Whereas as you progress in business, you realize that you need to outsource a lot of stuff, because, you know, in the corporate world, I would have had support with so many different things, but then all of a sudden I was trying to do them all myself. It was just, you look back and you think it's crazy.
Yeah, I can relate to that again. I remember, I think I was probably, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 months into my business, actually, when I had my first like proper meltdown, which you're kind of talking about. So I mean, I had clients quite very early on in terms of setting up the business. And then I'd wondered, like, just like something stupid, like my printer wouldn't connect to my laptop. And I just remember, so yeah, like 3 or 4 months in, my printer wouldn't connect to my laptop. And I was like, oh my God, like I can't do this, right? Because I didn't have an idea, like ordinarily, right? And it'd be like, hi, IT, help me. And I had this like, holy shit, right? I'm on my own. I have no team. I have nobody around me. I have no support. Like, this is literally just me. And that was like my first big meltdown in business. I was like something has to change. But yeah, we do, right? We go from being the experts in what we were doing to then having to be like jack of all trades, right? We're marketing, we're finance, we're sales, we're delivering, we're doing all this stuff when we kind of leave corporate, and if we start on our own. And yeah, you're absolutely right. I'm like, I have no idea how to do any of this stuff.
And what, you know, you realize after a while, you know, you've worked with people who have built a career, you know, like same kind of 20-year career that you've built in, like for us, built in HR. You know, people have done that in marketing, business, you know, business development, finance, all of these different things. And then actually you're having to do a bit of everything, and you've never really had to do that before. So yeah, you really have to think about how you're using your energy, and what expertise you bring in to support you. And that is really difficult in the early days, particularly when money, you know, money is a small amount at that point. You're not necessarily making the money that you would have been before.
Yeah. And I suppose it's the payoff, isn't it? Yes, we need the money there, but also we need to be right, happy, healthy, and high performing.
Yeah.
So in terms of that balance, it's quite difficult to do. So you'd said in terms of your so third time unlucky, you've got to this point of burnout. You've closed the door on this retreat. By the sounds of it, you had a great first retreat, right? Again, you're quite early on in business, so everything's going as it needs to. You've got seemingly a successful business on kind of the face of it. You close the door from this retreat, and then it's just like what happens? Like what was the impact at that point of burnout on you?
I mean, I was utterly exhausted. I mean, I felt like my energy levels had just completely gone. My mental capacity was just in pieces. I just didn't have the mental capacity or energy to make decisions, even the simplest of things like what we having for dinner tonight. You know, it got to a point where my brain just couldn't function.
Yeah.
And then energetically, I was still able to kind of like take the kids to school and things like that. But, you know, it'd get to like midday, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'd be like, I'm done, you know. And it was really bizarre, and it was really upsetting, because that's not me. You know, I'm high energy. I'm able to do a lot of things. I have not an endless capacity, but, you know, quite a good capacity for work and kind of home life. And to then not really be able to do a lot was really, really hard. And I did kind of know what I needed to do. You know, I knew I needed to get outside, and you know, all the things that I preach and I do now. You know, I moved, I went to yoga, I just did what I thought I needed to do. I even tried like cold swimming, which actually got me into a bit of trouble, because mentally I wasn't making the right decisions about how to do some of these things. And I was pushing my body beyond what it was capable of at the time, which made it worse. So I thought I was helping, but I wasn't. And part of the problem of that was that I didn't know it was burnout. So it might sound bizarre, but I thought I was perimenopausal. So a lot of the symptoms I was experiencing: brain fog, mood swings, feeling disengaged. There were lots of kind of tick it off the list things that were like, oh, maybe it's hormonal. So I even went to the doctor and had blood tests and things like that and that got ruled out. And then I met a friend and fellow coach for a coffee, and kind of told her what was going on. And she said, do you think you might be burnt out? Do you think this might be burnout? And it was at that point that I was kind of like, oh, maybe, and then that was the first time the thought had kind of come into my head that actually this could be something completely different and I need to deal with it in a different way. And from there it was like, I pulled back from work and I had to pull back from everything pretty much for quite a period of time. And then it resulted in anxiety and depression. So it kind of spiraled to a point where, family relationships, like with my parents and my side of the family, started to be affected by it. And I read books on it during that period of time and just after. And many people who are experts in the field will talk about the fact that everything burns out.
Yeah.
So when you burn out, it isn't just that you mentally and physically are burnt out. Things around you that maybe had been issues in the past, like little fires almost, they burn out too. It's almost like everything has to come to a point of like ashes for you to then rebuild. And I still feel the effects of some of those the issues that are affected with family relationships even now. But I think it's important to recognize that lots of things can happen during that process. It's not just about physical symptoms or mental symptoms. It's actually about your kind of whole life and how things then kind of roll out from there. Panic attacks in supermarkets, and when I had the young kids with, my young kids with me and things like that. So it kind of went worse, got worse before it then got better.
Yeah. Again, similar, right? I think for me and for for everybody that we speak to that has been through the same thing, that part of it seems to be very much the same. But I suppose I want to start with and thank you very much for sharing. I suppose I want to start with the point whereby you said, like, you just felt you had to push harder. Because again, I find that as something really common. That was where I got to, again, with all of the clients that I speak, anybody that I speak to about burnout, it seems to be that point that differentiates it from being, I'm knackered and I need to take a break, I'm exhausted and I need to do something different, I'm stressed and something needs to change. But it's almost like that, it's like a faulty off switch, right? It's like we know that something needs to change, we know that something has to stop, but mentally and physically we are absolutely pushing ourselves to the limit of, I have to keep going.
Mm-hmm.
And do you think, even with hindsight now, as you look back on it, would you be able to pinpoint why there was that need for you to keep going?
I think a lot of it is an inbuilt thing. So like your values and beliefs, the systems that are built over many, many years, and the tendencies that you have, I think have a huge role to play in it. So, I talked in the beginning about environment is one thing, but the other thing is the kind of makeup of the person. And having, you and I, as I said, have worked with other people who've been in this situation before. And I've worked with some fairly senior leaders who have done exactly that. They kind of they knew it was coming. It's almost like this creep that's happening, but they're like, no, I'm tired, I'll be able to manage. And then there's almost like this day or this situation, it's a conversation with someone at work, or it's a presentation that just went completely the wrong way, or a point where they were on a particular meeting and they then just kind of couldn't cope. And quite often these leaders have a moment where it's almost like self-destruct. They almost needed that like complete wipeout moment, which is not ideal, because for some, career-wise, it's seen by other people. It's not, there's no kind of lid on it. It's actually, you're kind of exposed in those situations. But for me, a lot of it would have been driven from perfectionist tendencies. A lot of it would have been driven from childhood. They kind of need to be well behaved, they need to be responsible. One thing I identified when I looked at my core values was that responsibility is really high for me, and that in a sort of measured sense is really healthy, because it's taking responsibility and ownership for my work, it's taking responsibility for earning money for my family, it's taking responsibility for my health. You could look at that in a really measured way, but when it goes into an overused strength or an overused value, it becomes like you've got the foot on the accelerator, there's this responsibility accelerator, and you can't get your foot off because you're responsible for everything that's around you. And if you drop a ball, it's the end of the world. So that's just kind of one example of a value that for me had been overused. But I think for many people, when I've looked at some of the research, I think the perfectionist kind of tendencies, the try hard, be perfect kind of drivers do tend to be prevalent in some of the leaders that I've worked with. And that can take quite a lot of undoing. You know, it's because that's what you've built your career on. That's what you're respected and credible.
Yeah, and I think that's where we get the difficulty. And again, I think with a lot of the clients that I speak to, it's almost like, and even for me sometimes, I still go back to, and I don't know if you're the same, it's like all of the stuff, all of the parts of me that got me to be successful in my career, all of those strengths and all of those things were, you know, like climbing the ladder and having everything, were also the bits that, as you said, the flip side of all of them were also the parts that got me to the point of burnout.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost, I don't know if you experience the same, but it's almost like, so now what are my strengths, right? What are my strengths and who am I? Because if all of that stuff had got me to this success and had also got me to the point of burnout, like, what do I do now? Right? Who am I? Where do I go? What direction am I heading in? Which parts of me should I be listening to or not listening to? And did you find the same with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I got to a point where I did a lot of self-reflection, obviously. You know, I started working with a coach, which was incredibly helpful. I just took the time to better understand myself. And I'd say that that's a journey. You know, I have learned so much over the, even pandemic, and taught me a lot about myself. You know, I just got to the point where I was coming out of burnout and kind of coming back to work, and the pandemic hit. So I then had to rethink about how I was going to do things. And I feel like every day, every week, every month, I learn more about myself, but with this foundation of my core values. This whole kind of thing around what led you to be successful, and making sure that you can continue to be successful, but in a different way. And I think that's where it comes into now my business model around helping people understand how they can be their best and what their strengths are and what their excellencies are, but without overdoing them, and knowing yourself well enough that the trigger or the penny drops at that point, and you recognize that much sooner. That for me has probably been one of the key things. I know myself well enough now that if I'm overdoing it, for example, or I'm doing something that I know is not in service of me or my family or whatever, I notice it quicker. It's literally like a mirror, or I can't quite describe what it is, but it happens much sooner, and then I can put things in place or start doing things differently. Whereas I think perhaps the people that haven't, we call it inner work, haven't done that kind of work and of self-discovery, may not recognise that soon enough. And that's when it kind of trips into unfortunate situations, maybe.
Yeah. Thank you. And you said with, for you, it had also kind of crept into, I suppose as part of the aftermath or a symptom of burnout, getting you to this point of anxiety and depression. Is that something that is still prevalent for you, or do you think that you've been able to kind of work through that?
I've certainly worked through it, and I actually I ended up on medication. So this was the end. I'm trying to think about the dates now. So it must have been like end of 2019. It got to such a point that I wasn't functioning well at all, and I had this prescription from the doctor for a really low dose antidepressant, and I stared at it for weeks and weeks and weeks because it felt to me like a failure. For me, I couldn't quite connect the dots between you need this break or boost, to put a better word around it, to allow your brain to have a rest rather than being in a high state, high anxiety all the time. And I spoke to a friend who was a friend's mum who was a retired GP and felt much better about the decision. And I was probably on them for about 3 or 4 weeks, which is a short period of time. I'm no doctor, but from everything that I've read, you need them in your system for a period of time. but it dampened my emotions so much to the point that I didn't feel the good stuff that was happening. I didn't like not feeling, I felt just completely, everything was dulled. So I came off them, and then colour came back into my life, I guess is how I can only explain it. You know, I gradually got to a point where things felt better. My brain had that rest that it needed, that took that breath, and it was then able to kind of go again and build up from there. And that's when I was able to make kind of, I guess, better decisions and just feel much better about life and things that was going on at the time. But I learned so much from having gone through that process. And it's one where I think I will never go back there again. You know, I feel like I know enough about myself that it wouldn't happen again. I hope.
Yeah, but no, again, and I think you're right, because and you said it in terms of that, like that inner work, right? That self-awareness, that self-discovery. It is a constant, right? I think once you start it, there's no really getting off, is it? Right? You're learning yourself. You're learning something about yourself every single day. I think there can be that fear again. I don't know if you experience the same, but I think sometimes there can be that fear of, shit, what if I get to that point of burnout again, or anxiety or depression or mental issues or overwork or whatever. But also throughout all of that self-awareness and self-discovery, the people that we are as of today are not the same people that we were when we got to that point of burnout, right? There's been a hell of a lot of inner work, self-discovery, all like boundaries, implementation, understanding core values, all of that sort of stuff, right? So where you say, like, I hope it won't happen again, like I don't think it would for you. I don't think it would for me, because we're just in a completely different space now.
Yeah, completely. And, you know, people talk about I'm a new me, you know, I want to be a new me. People talk about that. I think it's more about being a better version of you, because you are you because of what's happened to you. You can't erase all of that. But you then go on to, you know, have a different perspective, have a different outlook on life, having learned all of those things. And then you can go on and help other people. And I guess that's where both of us are at, is that we are able to help other people have a perspective. It's not just about the coaching, it's about the kind of thought partnership that goes on within those relationships. And not just helping individuals, but helping organizations and HR teams to create environments that are, I mentioned the word psychologically safe, you know, creating environments where people feel they can come to work as their whole self. And it's not just about turning up and doing the day job. It's actually, how can we create cultures that enable people to be themselves, and if they've got stuff going on home, they can share that. You know, people can be vulnerable to a point. So yeah, I'm kind of really passionate about the kind of the self-leadership that goes on, but also the collective leadership that goes on within organizations. Having had that corporate experience and that business owner experience, it's how do you help, you know, larger organizations, but also smaller businesses as well? How do you help everyone be the best they can be, I guess?
Yeah, because I suppose, do you also find that maybe you hit, you know, it's okay for you as a small business owner, of course you can be doing all of these things, but it can't possibly work for us in corporate, right? Do you still get a lot of that? I do.
Yeah, I think there's probably that element of, well, if you're running your own business, lucky you're autonomous and you're flexible, and you know, you can create the environment that you want to. Of course you can. Like I absolutely believe that you do. But ultimately, you still have to provide. You still have to be able to earn money in the same way that a large organisation would do. You still need people around you, whether you employ a team or work with associates or outsource or whatever. You still need to engage and connect with people in a really positive way. So I think it's different, but not impossible. Like it's, you know, there's so many similarities, and you know, you can bespoke it for certain organisations, but lots of the fundamentals are the same.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. What do you think or what do you wish you had either, I don't know, known, changed, done before you got to that point of burnout? Because I suppose particularly for you, you kind of had almost like 2 trial runs on it, right? Before you really went for it the third time round. So yeah, what do you kind of wish that you'd either known, changed, done, thought before you got to that point?
I think a big part of it is, I was going to say respecting myself. I suppose it's not quite the right word, but kind of like prioritizing myself would have been a key thing. You know, I kind of always put myself last on the list, I guess. You know, when you're a mum with a young family and you've got a career and there's so much to juggle, your health and well-being kind of gets put at the bottom of the pile. So I think there's definitely an element of understanding that your resilience, building your resilience and your capacity is really important to be able to do all of those things. I think the other thing for me is something around kind of self-belief, confidence, almost like silencing the inner critic, because for me that was playing a huge part as well. When I was in the corporate world, I was in roles at a relatively young age. So I was coming to leadership teams as the youngest of the leadership team. I was coming to, global HR team meetings or European HR team meetings as one of the younger in the team. And I think there was probably always something playing out in my mind. I didn't belong there. So I would, in some ways, kind of undersell myself to myself. And I think all of that inner dialogue probably wasn't helping me. And it was making me push even harder than maybe I needed to. So yeah, I think I wished I'd known that there were different ways of doing things. I wish someone had maybe taken me under their wing, spotted that maybe that was happening. I don't know. It's difficult. It's difficult to say with hindsight, but I think they're key things. If I was talking to someone much younger, or someone perhaps who hadn't been through this experience, they're probably the things that I would share.
Yeah. And again, I think you and I are very similar in that, you know, I was the youngest. I was quite often at my peer level, like the only woman, also young mum, young kids, all of that sort of stuff. And I think when you said there, like, I wish someone had identified it. I don't know necessarily that I was able to spot that in myself as one of the things that I was maybe trying to prove. And I don't know who I was trying to prove what to, but yeah, definitely in terms of that pushing and perfectionism. And so again, I think from an organization perspective, and hopefully with the work that I am and many others are doing, again, helping people to identify that might be an issue for some people, to help them prevent them getting to that point of burnout, right? You know, it is, again, I think you'd probably agree with this one. It's like, it's not, it really is like the perfectionist overperformers that are getting to that point of burnout, certainly a lot quicker than anybody else. I'm not saying it's not happening to other people, but it's not those of us that are just kind of sat back, you know, coasting in our career, just kind of, you know, hoping that one day we may at some point climb the ladder, right?
Yeah.
And again, I know I talk a lot about, you've got to be looking after your top performers. You've got to be looking after these people that are pushing and working all of the hours, because whilst we might look like we are coping and can continue to take all of the stuff on, it is us that are burning out a hell of a lot quicker than anybody else.
Yeah, completely. And, you know, the young family part that you mentioned there, you know, a number of things, you know, I was in a minority in terms of being female. I was definitely in the minority. I was the only one on a number of leadership teams who had young children. You know, people were quite a bit older than me and more seasoned in their career. Their children much older. They were like leaving school, going to uni, that kind of thing. Whereas mine were preschool at that point. And I really felt like maybe people wouldn't understand. Like, and I also thought, back to your point at the very beginning, that was normal. Like, I was earning a decent salary. I had an amazing opportunity. I was, you know, my career was sort of taking off. You know, it came with the territory. You know, it was just to be accepted that you just had to literally just keep pushing and pushing and pushing. And I think there's so many people who are probably in the same situation now. Or people who maybe have been in their career for a long period of time and pushed for so long. That's another camp of people. They kind of get to a point where it's been like, you've been in this career for 30, 35 years. Actually, this sustained level of stress has built up to a point where, you know, no more, that's it. So yeah, I think it's, there's behaviors in people that will definitely mean people will burn out quicker. Sorry.
Yeah. Absolutely, and I think we've probably got all of those behaviours between the two of us, right?
Really,
we're like a lethal combination of the two. I suppose my final question on this before we kind of bring this to a close for today. But what do you think that people need to know about burnout that we're just not widely speaking about?
I think it's the double part that is about the person as well as the environment. So we talk a lot about the environment, toxicity, having a bad manager, high pressure, all that kind of thing. And yes, that has a huge part to play in it. But I think there's this kind of unspoken thing that's actually about you and how you may be wired to burn out because of how you're behaving and the values and beliefs that you hold. And actually a big part of it is for organizations to invest in their leaders to do some of this inner work, this self-leadership work that actually these high performers don't have time to do. You know, that's the one thing that people will say, I don't have time. You know, the company can put the money there, but actually how do you free up this space and give people permission to do this work that will enable them to succeed, the organization to succeed? Because there's a huge ripple effect when you invest in your leaders to be the best they can be. You know, they manage their teams better, their teams perform better. You know, the bottom line is massively impacted by what might seem like a fairly small token gesture for one or two leaders. The ripple effect can be huge.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. So we need to be kind of, I suppose, looking at it from both sides of the fence, right? Individuals and leaders within organizations. What can we do to stop it? Ensuring that people have got the support, the investment, and then I think, like you said, like time. You've mentioned time quite a lot as we've been kind of talking today, so I'll make the assumption that that's something that's important for you, and also in the lessons that you've learned, and then in the work that you're helping leaders and organisations to create more of. Is that fair?
Absolutely, yes, totally. And business owners too. You know, the thing there around working with large organizations, but actually the fact that I burnt out business as a business owner, that kind of entrepreneur burnout is prevalent too. So how do we help everybody to kind of learn how to be their best so it doesn't happen?
Amazing. Thank you. Anything else about either your burnout experience or burnout in general that you would like to leave the audience with?
I guess the only thing I would say is probably investing in yourself is one of the best things you can ever do. It might feel like it's selfish, or it might feel a bit kind of like a luxury, but actually it's really, really important. Like you're it's not just for you, but it's actually for the people around you. You know, you'll be being a better version of you means being a better mum, a better wife, husband, you know, leader in the community, leader in an organization. You know, when I talk about that ripple effect, that is literally what I mean. It's the impact that you can then have on somebody else that then leads somebody else to have a great impact. So I'd say just don't see investing in yourself as selfish at all. Just, you know, it's not a luxury, it's a necessity.
Absolutely. Awesome. Thank you very much. Michelle, where can people find out more about you and what you do?
Okay, so I'm on LinkedIn quite a bit. So got my Michelle Yeoman link on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram and Facebook, and then my Awakened Executives website as well.
Fabulous. Thank you. And do check out the work that Michelle's doing. Fabulous stuff. And again, like creating those ripples, right? Making that change. And happy, what was it? Happy, healthy, high
performing.
Yeah. Who want to be that, right? Happy, healthy, and high performing. And we all want a bit more of that. So I'm going to say thank you. So yeah, absolutely do check out Michelle's work. I would just thank you for sharing.
Thank you for having me on. Thank you for making me your first guest.
Yay!
Making a great start to the first proper week of January.
Yeah, it's good.
I'm back at work this week.
Absolutely, I'm looking forward to the week. I just need to I'm going to keep dressing as brightly.
Yeah, you've got a lot on with all your interviews, so I hope they're going really well.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm gonna keep dressing brightly until Thursday and see what difference that makes. But thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
It's been helpful. So yeah, it's been a pleasure. So thank you very much. Thank you everybody for watching, asking, getting involved as much as you can. Again, do share, and please do get in contact with Michelle. I'm going to be back with all of you live at 11 with my next guest, so 13 minutes from now. Michelle, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. I'll see you all soon. Take care.
No worries. Thank you. Bye.